Good evening. My name is Royce Van Tassel. We are thrilled to have all of you here. I am the Executive Director of the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, and UAPCS is one member of the Utah Education Debate Coalition. We want to, we have a number of members that are part of that coalition. In addition to UAPCS, you'll see the Sutherland Institute, who very graciously is Facebook Living this so that all of this will be available to the millions of viewers throughout the state that I'm sure are tuned in. This will also be available when we're done on the Sutherland Institute's Facebook page. People are welcome to pose questions there. We had quite a few people pose questions at our debate last night from Facebook, and we are unlikely to be able to get to all of the questions that get posed tonight, and so our request to the candidates will be after the debate to go on to that page and respond to all of the questions that get posed there. In addition to Sutherland and UAPCS, our partners include the United Way of Salt Lake, the Hinckley Institute of Politics, KSL, and the Deseret News. Our moderator this evening, and I will turn the time over to her in just a moment, is Morgan Cotty, who is the #2 person over at the Hinckley Institute of Politics. I don't know what her actual title is, but I hope she doesn't take offense at that. We are going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and that will be led by my good friend Jay Blaine, who is here. He's a resident of the district, and he and I attend all of the state board meetings together. So Jay, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Morgan will give us instructions on how the evening's going to go.
Will the audience please rise? Repeat the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Morgan Lyon Cotty, and I'm the Associate Director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. I'm very pleased to be here this evening and to work with the wonderful group with the Utah Debate Coalition. And thank you also to Entheos Academy for having us and hosting us tonight. Thank you to our wonderful audience who came out on, I'm sure, a busy weeknight to learn about the issues from these candidates, and thank you also to our candidates who came, Brittany Cummins and Megan Ruff, to talk about education and their platforms and why they are seeking this elected position. The way this debate will go, each candidate will give a 90-second opening statement. From there on, we will have a series of questions that have been developed by the Utah Debate Coalition. We hope that that takes about half of the time, and then we want to leave the other half for your audience questions, those who are in the room and also those who are watching on Facebook Live. At the end, each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 60-second closing statement. We rolled an online die, and according to that, Brittany Cummins will be the first one to give her opening statement. Please.
I'd like to say that it's a pleasure to be here, but I'm feeling a little bit nervous and lots of butterflies, so thank you. I hope to be able to communicate tonight to you my love for education. It has been a passion for me since I was in 4th grade, sitting in a classroom dreaming of becoming a teacher someday. I have had the opportunity to experience education from many perspectives as I've raised my children, as they've been a part of education in different levels and different experiences. I have seen many great things over the last 4 years as a member of the State Board of Education, and I look forward to continuing to see those. As a community, we can make a difference for each Utah student.
Please, Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm equally as nervous. I I always have loved education since I was a kid, and I grew up and I became a teacher, and I am very passionate about the students and the teachers that I work with, and I hope to continue to advocate and stay passionate about those things when I become part of the school board.
And I know it's tricky, but try to hold those microphones as close to your mouths as possible. It's a big room, and we want to make sure everyone can hear. So our first question will now go to Megan. There's been a lot of media attention over the last few years about the teacher shortage here in Utah and really nationwide. We've seen different school districts try to tackle this and come up with solutions on their own. But in your view, what is the role of the state school board to help solve this challenge?
I've seen that teacher shortage firsthand. Being a teacher in a school, we've had a lot of turnover and a lot of teachers leaving to seek positions elsewhere because of money and things like that. The school board has put in the alternative route to licensure, and they are trying to get teachers back into these positions. And I think that we need to try and keep teachers here in the schools, because students get attached to these teachers, and to have these high turnover rates and to not have licensed teachers and things like that, I think that we really do need to keep addressing it in the school board level. Does that answer the question?
Sure.
The teacher shortage is a difficult question to answer at any level of education governance, and I think each level of governance plays an integral role in maintaining and retaining teachers. And I think at the state level, I think one of the biggest questions that we've started to ask and we need to continue to ask is, why are teachers leaving? And what are the conditions that we're creating at the state level that create those pressures that make it so that teachers don't want to be in the classrooms anymore? And then to couple our efforts with LEAs as they strive to retain their teachers, and we create the flexibility that they need.
Both of you touched a little bit on licensing, so maybe let's talk about that. We've had some debates over the teacher licensing process here in Utah. Some are very in favor of change. Some of these policies have really been met with some very stiff resistance. So I believe we're back to Brittany. Let's start with you. What are the purposes of teacher licensing, and what role should the state board play in determining who holds a teacher's license?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, and oftentimes in the conversation we jumble licensing with teacher effectiveness. And licensing is basically a permission granted to an individual to be in a classroom. So the state board's role is to establish those base minimums. What does it mean to be qualified to be in a classroom? And then freeing up the flexibility for LEAs to decide teacher effectiveness as those teachers go along. But one of the most important roles of that licensing is the ability for the licensing agent to remove that license. And so we need to maintain the ability to license so that we can say when a teacher has lost that trust to be in a classroom, that their license can be revoked and they can be removed from the classrooms.
Teacher licensing. What is the role of the school board in teacher licensing, and what is the purpose of teacher licensure?
I think the role of the school board in teacher licensing is trying to make it more accessible so that we can get more teachers in the field, but also to really evaluate those teachers and making sure that they are the teachers that our students need. And like Brittany was saying, the effectiveness of teachers gets tied into it a little bit, because to be a teacher, you need to be effective in the classroom, and part of your maintaining your license and that kind of stuff is you are constantly evaluated as a teacher to be effective with your students and to give them those opportunities to respond and to grow and develop. And I feel like that's a huge portion of teacher licensing.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Some of our schools and some of the resources and textbooks and other materials in our schools are outdated. And some teachers in other states have even moved to use Facebook, showing these textbooks that are falling apart or are even older than some of the students that are using them. So how will you work to modernize public education and ensure students in Utah are ready for this new economy and prepared to succeed in an increasingly technology-driven economy? And I believe we start with Megan.
I have seen these Facebook posts, particularly out of Arizona. In my experience in schools, we've always had pretty updated textbooks. It's a matter of these schools and these teachers and principals finding curriculums that are going to work best for kids. But we also need to upgrade into the modern age of using this technology that a lot of schools have, of the Google tablets and the iPads and things like that, because students, that's the new world, and students need to be able to utilize those tools in order to be successful in their future.
I think this question has 2 points to it. There's the ability of a student to consume technology and to use technology, and then the ability of a student to create technology and to use technology to create something. And I think districts and charter schools are beginning to go down that road where they're bringing technology in as a tool for instruction development and giving that instruction to students. There's also a lot of movement right now to increase the access for students to become technological creators. And I participated in a task force recently that's going to make a recommendation to the State Board of Education tomorrow regarding computer science and what those skills could look like beginning in the early elementary years, not just consuming and screen time, but really learning computing processes even outside of screen time. And so there's some really exciting things happening and some recommendations that are beginning. So.
There's also always the challenge of how do we evaluate our schools, and especially because with Utah's opt-out laws, students or parents have the ability to have their students not take some of these standardized tests, allowing parents a little bit more flexibility, but also making it hard for the state school board and other entities to measure how these schools are doing. So the question is, how should the state school board evaluate which schools are succeeding and which schools need to improve? And I believe we start with you, Brittany.
Yeah, accountability is a tough topic. And I do think that there is a lot of room, and we are moving in a direction of accountability that's moving away from one single data point, which is the test, and pushing towards multiple data points where schools have the opportunity to talk about goals that they've set, how they've reached them, and where they're at. And I'm really looking forward to this new round of report cards, that we call them, that go out to schools that are actually going to have less of that emphasis on the test score and the proficiency and more on growth and the ability for schools to report individualized data, things that they're excited about at the school level. And I think as we continue to move in this direction, that it'll help to ease the pressure off of that important data point, which is, a statewide test, but to ease the pressure off of it so that it does become an important data point, but allow teachers to feel a little bit more comfortable in their space as a teacher.
Yeah, dealing with how do we assess schools. So what's the best way, or what is the role of the school board in determining which schools are succeeding and which schools need to improve?
The single letter grade that goes out for schools has been primarily based upon that one single test that comes at the end of the year. I think that it's great that they're going in a better direction for the individual growth of kids, because really when it comes down to it, the individual growth that a student makes in 1 year can be massive and should account for the teacher and the effectiveness of a school, because the teacher is clearly making leaps and bounds of growth with certain particular kids, but it doesn't always show school-wide. So I think that it's important for the individual to be assessed and not the school as a whole.
Let's shift gears again and talk a little bit about governance. It's important in order for the state school board to work effectively, it must work with other branches of government, other levels of government, and we've seen how the relationship, especially between the school board and the legislature and governor, has waxed and waned over the years. So tell us how you individually would help to improve the relationship between the school board and the legislature and make sure it is an effective working partnership. Megan.
As a member of the JEA and things, we've had to deal with the legislator and come to a lot of compromises and work things out together. And I think that a lot of what the school board just needs is just to find that ground to work with the legislator on particular issues that are affecting our schools on a daily basis. And it's just a matter of, I think, communicating better what schools need and what the school board is trying to do to get the things that schools need.
I believe the structure that we have in our Constitution is quite beneficial, where you have a state board of education with general control and supervision and a legislature who holds the purse strings. And it allows the State Board of Education yearly to approach the legislature and account for the education spending, and it adds a lot of transparency. There is inherent in that a lot of tension, but that tension isn't always bad as we account for that. I've spent the past few years helping to improve the board's preparation for that legislative session so that when we go to the legislature that we're prepared and that relationship is there, is built on trust that says we know that we're asking for more money, and this is why, and these are the strategic priorities that this ask is supporting. And I hope to continue to work towards that as we develop those relationships with the legislature and they begin to trust the education community with the funding that they provide.
Along those same lines, who do you believe should be the primary driver of education policy? Should it be the governor, the legislature, the state school board, local school districts, or a different entity or different person? Brittany.
Well, I believe, I'm not biased on this or anything, but I believe the primary driver should be the State Board of Education, but we're driving a big school bus and there's a lot of education stakeholders on that bus. We're all on that bus together, people who find education to be important. And we have the opportunity to take deliberate steps so you as a constituent can approach your state board member and say, here's my concern, here's something, here's my idea, here's anything that I want to see happen. And that state board member has the opportunity to take that to their board and to take the time to deliberately produce policy, to deliberately produce a recommendation if legislative change is necessary. And so the State Board of Education, because it has the time and it has the professional resources, it truly has the ability to be that driver, but recognizing that it is all of our constituents and those that we share with our legislative partners, as well as those who the governor represents, that together we truly can improve education policy.
I think that the local level has a huge impact upon, especially the districts themselves, in what is happening in schools. I think that they have great ideas and are moving forward with a lot of fantastic things, especially in local areas. I think it would be beneficial for the local areas to work closely with the state school board more than they already do, because each local school board, like Jordan District School Board, is doing great things, but it's hard when you have the big school bus that is the state school board and communicating all these needs into one place. But I think that local really has great ideas and could really help the state school board.
With the role of the state school board, what do you believe are the most important functions of the state school board within the state? Megan?
I think teacher licensing is a big thing that the state is part of, and I think that that's something that I hear a lot of teachers talk about. That's, to me, one of their biggest primary functions is the teacher licensing, and just kind of being this middle ground between the funding and its allocations towards schools and districts.
Yeah, I think that our two most important components in the education system are our students and the teachers. And so I would agree that the two most important functions follow that same route, that we have teacher licensing and we have the ability to set standards for students. And so I think those are the most important functions, those things that we do as a state board, and I think their purpose is to truly support the most important components of our system.
One or two final questions about the budget, and then I'd love to turn it over to the audience. So I hope our audience members have some great questions in mind. The state school board manages a $4 billion question. So we'll ask two questions, or budget, excuse me, a $4 billion budget. Sometimes there are questions about how to spend it. So perhaps the first question, what qualifies you to manage this budget? Yeah. Brittany.
Well, I'd like to say it was my $4 billion family budget that qualifies me to manage it, but it's not. But what does qualify me for that is the fact that I do manage a very small family budget. And I have come to recognize the importance of pennies. And I value and I respect pennies. And sometimes when you look at $4 billion budgets, people often will say, well, that couple million is only a small percentage of whatever. But that couple million, I value that. I recognize what it means to you as a taxpayer to sacrifice those few hundreds or thousands of dollars, that they matter. And so that qualifies me to be very strategic with how we talk about the education budget. Every penny matters, and it matters to me, and I know that it matters to you.
As a teacher, I have had to work with my own budget. As a special educator, we are allocated a certain amount of money every year to spend on our students in our classroom, and we also are given a legislative budget. And you do have to be really picky about things that you want to buy for your classroom because it's not a lot of money, and you have to be very strategic in the choices that you make for your students and how that money is allocated to those kids. So I feel like I know where money is going in schools only because I've had to utilize it just on my individual classroom basis.
Thank you. I believe Royce has the microphone, so if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. When you get the microphone, please tell us your name and state your question clearly into the mic. Oh, here we go. Thank you.
Okay. State your name. State my name. Diane Pope. And what was the other thing that you said?
Just state your question clearly into the microphone, please.
Yes.
Your question, yeah.
Hold it up to my mouth, right? So it can echo in the room, right? I have a very interesting question. Why don't children get to be children in school anymore? They go in like little robots. I've seen them for years, and they're getting more robotic all the time. They don't know how to play on the playground. When you have to have somebody come in and teach them how to play, there's a problem. I think the kids need a wee bit of a rest occasionally from studies. Studies are fine and grand, but they need to be kids. And I think they're being shortchanged nowadays. They don't get to be a child.
So
they have to grow up.
Right, so is the question...
The question is, why do they not get to be kids when they're kids?
All right, I believe, Megan, you're first up.
I've been in a school now for 7 years, and I've seen it through many programs. Each school kind of is making their own individual choices as to which programs they put in their school. So we got a grant through the Beverly Taylor Sorensen program for the arts, and so our kids were allocated like an arts period and a PE period and things like that. So it really does come down to the individual school and what they're choosing to do for kids. I would like to see every school have those programs because I really do feel like they really impact children's creative thinking and critical thinking skills because play is an important social skill. Yeah, it just really comes down to the individual school and them making those choices for kids.
Yeah, I agree with Megan that it is an individual choice of school and it's an individual choice of teacher. Sometimes you schedule a recess here and a recess there. You got 30 minutes to eat and, quick get out and go. And I think it's how do we relieve the pressure so that a teacher can learn with their students how to play again, right? I think it's not just our students that aren't playing anymore, but I think our teachers have also lost that feeling and that ability to play because learning is fun and that play can extend not just to recess time, but it can extend to art lessons, it can extend to music lessons, as you were saying before, it can extend to math lessons. How do you play and learn at the same time? And so I think we do have a lot of room to grow there. And I think, when we talk about the state board's responsibilities, how do we relieve that pressure at the state level so that all that are involved can learn to play again?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
I'm David DeMille. My question's, what are the reasons and the whys about the extracurricular activities that are performed in junior high and high school, and which ones should be funded and which ones should not be?
Brittany.
So your question is what should be funded as far as extracurricular activities at the junior high level? And they have classes. As a parent, this is a difficult question as I've tried to schedule with my children as they're trying to figure out how to schedule their time, but they're required to take a class in order to participate in extracurricular activities. It's been a difficult question, but it really is something that is a district level decision on how they schedule and what extracurricular activities they budget for. So I can only answer as a parent that I enjoy the flexibility and the opportunity my students have at school, but I also want them to have the time to fulfill the classes that they're seeking, the things that they want to learn, the things that they want to explore academically as well. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Like Brittany said, it really does come down to the school and the individual local district as to how that money is allocated and what grants teachers and these schools get and what those grants can be used for. That's where all the money comes from, unfortunately, and I wish it were different, but that's just the way it is.
I believe we have a question in the back, and then we have an online question.
Brittany Fellows, and one of the concerns I think a majority of teachers have is overcrowded classrooms, FTE to student ratios, and funding. So how would you propose the state board resolve some of those issues? In other states, the cap level for students is much lower and the teacher pay is much higher, which I think may be a contributing factor to lots of teachers fleeing the state of Utah to find other areas for teaching. So what are some ways that the state office can address those issues? Utah being special in that we have more children than other states. How can we help ease that issue for teachers?
Megan.
As a teacher in Jordan District, I see that overcrowding, and especially on the west side where we've seen a lot of expansion and the population increase, and a lot of those are young families with kids who are in elementary and middle school and high school. I know at the district level they are trying to build more schools to address that issue, but it just doesn't seem to be happening as fast as the growth out there is happening. So I think at the state level we could possibly find ways to reevaluate how these schools are going to deal with this overcrowding issue, because we can't build schools fast enough on the west side right now. Brittany.
Yeah, this is a topic that's been rolling for years, and several years ago, I'm sure you were aware of the class size reduction appropriation that didn't ever grow, and so now it's the class size maintenance fund. And so it's a difficult topic that's not being ignored. It's just very difficult to answer, because when you talk about reducing class size, it's not just about more FTE or more teachers, it's also about more space, buildings and everything. And so it's a very expensive question to answer. And so how do we answer it? And so there's a lot of ideas going around in regard to how do you get more bodies in the same classroom maybe? Do you have 2 teachers in one classroom where they team teach together so that you can use the same space but be able to increase the number of adults interacting with students in a classroom? And so at the state board level, we obviously, as I discussed before, we don't hold the purse strings, but we do have a voice, and we do put together a budget each year. And so we have the opportunity to really speak for this issue. And we have in the past, as we've looked for growth in the class size reduction appropriation, or at least changing that appropriation so the money goes into the WPU, which is the general fund, so that LEAs or districts have more flexibility to make those class size reductions individually. And so that is a topic, but it's how do we answer it in a very fiscally restrained environment.
Thank you. Our online question.
Hello, yes. Oh, wow, it's loud. So this question comes from April Mahan, who is tuning in on our Facebook live stream. And April asks, many studies have shown the importance of expanded age-appropriate sex ed in schools. However, Utah continues to stress mainly abstinence-only education. She would like to know what are each of your feelings on the subject.
Thank you. Brittany.
Sex education is a fun topic, and it brings out lots of people whenever it's on an agenda item. We're actually reviewing our current health standards at the moment, and so it's how do we ensure that students have the information that they need. And so that is a topic that we are currently discussing, and I am very much in favor of ensuring that students have the opportunity. We have an opt-in policy basically in all of our health classes for Utah, and so students have the opportunity to pick and choose what concepts they want. And so that leaves a lot of flexibility for us as a state to provide information, but then also parents and students to decide how much of that they want to access through school and how much they want to access at home in conversations together. So I think we have a lot of opportunity right now, and I'm really excited about the conversation.
I know that their new standards are coming up with health and I think with science. And there's always been that opt-ed of what what parents want kids to learn and what kids want to learn about sex ed. I think that knowledge is a good tool for kids, especially in those kinds of situations. They should know the right tools for the right situation. That I'm going into too much detail. I'm glad that there is a choice for parents and for kids in that department, and I'm excited to see what the new health standards are.
Another question over here. Oh, several questions. Thank you.
Hi. Hey, my name's Dalton Horscroft. I live just a street over and actually teach at the school. But I appreciate that you're taking your time to be here so we can hear your opinions. I'd like to know where you stand on the whole charter school system. Are you in favor of being part of alleviating some of that pressure in the classrooms, or just where do you stand on charter schools fitting into the whole system?
Oh, I'm first.
Yes, you're first.
I'm first. I went to public school for quite a bit of my schooling, but I completed my schooling at a charter high school because I felt like public school wasn't meeting my needs the way I needed them met. So I see there is a place for charter schools. Sometimes I feel like, now as a public educator, I feel like sometimes charter schools aren't held to the exact same standards as public school, and sometimes I feel like maybe they're taking away a little bit from public school, but I think that some charter schools do have good intentions and are showing good results and data from their students. And so I think it all kind of depends on the charter school and the students' needs that are being met there. I'm not for or against them. I just think that there is places for certain charter schools, and it kind of just depends on the data that they're putting out.
I currently serve on a board of a charter school here in West Valley City, and so I think they have the opportunity in charter schools is to provide choice, and that's what they provide. They give parents and students the opportunity to find something that works for them. And we're lucky in Utah to have a variety of charter schools, whether it's an online option or it's a blended option, or there's just so much variety in the charter realm, as well as students looking for a specific focus in what they're doing, as you talked about in high school options. And so I think it has a definite positive place in Utah education. And I think there is great opportunity to be collaborative and to work with district schools. My children attend a district high school. So there's great opportunity for us to be a team as we all seek to educate Utah students in different ways, depending on what they need, what parents need, what teachers are looking for, and what we're looking for. And so I think the value of a charter school is in the choice that it provides and in the academic opportunity that's available for students there. And I think the same thing is available to every district school. We're all public schools together, and we all have the opportunity to work towards better education for our students.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Bell. I want to thank both of you for coming here tonight. Megan, you mentioned science standards also coming up. My question is geared towards that. What is the state board's role in guiding what is being taught in our science classrooms as evolution and Big Bang versus intelligent design, merging those, keeping them separate? What are your views? What is the state board's role, and what are your plans with that going forward? Thank you.
I noticed your NASA t-shirt, fantastic. I am actually really excited about the development of the new science standards. When I first got onto the board, my first meeting was the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science standards, and it was like this big shock. But we're beginning the process of the younger years as well as the high school, and there's a lot of opportunity in it. A lot of opportunity to really look at science as a whole. What is it that's going to get students excited about exploring science? What's going to get them excited about wanting to take place? You know, we talked about earlier computer science and technology, that we want our students not to be consumers of the world around them only, but to be creators and to be involved, to be scientists. And that was kind of the concept between the 6th, 7th, and 8th science standards. And I think that's the similar driving factor that's informing the science standards that we're currently under consideration. And so I think that's the drive, is what's out there, what is good science, and how do we get students excited about it and help them to prepare for their futures.
I am a bit of a science geek. I love science, and I recently tried a lot of science. I teach special ed, and I have taught a lot of science at multiple grade levels within my classroom this year. I did a lot more science, and I am excited to see the new standards, and I would like to see those kinds of topics talked about, like the evolution and that kind of thing, because when you get to the college level, it's going to be talked about in biology and all your science classes, anthropology, all of it's going to talk about those kinds of topics that people, they seem to be like hot button topics, but the science is there. Science is out there. Yeah.
My name is Michelle Stratton, and my question, we had touched earlier just briefly on standardized testing and how the truth is that it is not necessarily a complete or even accurate judge of how the school, teacher, and the individual is doing. And you had said that you need to get that back onto the individual. How is it that you propose to do that? How do we get more of the individualized testing?
Our school is part of a turnaround program, and so they are taking benchmarks throughout the year. Each grade level is taking benchmarks on reading and math, and those benchmarks are assessed on the individual. And so they have like a pre-assessment and a post-assessment, and so each kid is being individually tested, and that data is being presented. And that data, I feel like, is more of a picture of growth for that child than the end of the year cumulative SAGE testing that's happening. And as somebody who works with children with disabilities, the individual data is so important to me because that's how I see my students grow. So I would like to see it become more like that for all kids, because the growth that an individual makes is more important than the growth of a whole grade level.
Yeah. Formative assessment, or that assessment that takes place between a student and a teacher, is an art, I think. It's that opportunity where a teacher looks into a student's eyes or looks onto a paper that they just saw, and they know, yes, this student gets it, or I need to help the student get to here with it. And so I think formative assessment, or that very individualized assessment, is something that takes place in every classroom, and it should. I think what we need to do at the state level is to relieve the pressure of that statewide testing so that it has its place. It's an important data point across the state. As we look at taxpayer accountability for the funding that's provided, we need some data. And so it's how do we relieve the pressure so it becomes just that, data. And then leaving the opportunity for the teachers to really do their art, to assess students on a daily, a minute-to-minute basis, however they see fit, whether it's a quiz or just a conversation where they really get to the point where they know their students and they feel free enough to really assess their students on a regular basis that way.
Hi there, I'm Matthew Gordon. I graduated high school this year, and I've been through the advanced placement programs, I've been through the gifted and talented programs, I've been high school debate, other extracurricular, higher learning activities. And I've noticed that throughout my time in education, that the Hispanic population, the Polynesian population, that in these AP classes, in these gifted and talented classes, they were unrepresented compared to the student body as a whole. For example, at Taylorsville High School, 37% of the population were Hispanic kids, and yet anywhere from 8% to 12% of the students in these higher placement classes, these AP classes, were Hispanic students or Polynesian students, etc. And so what role does the State Board of Education, if any, have in regards to maintaining racial representation, racial equality, etc., in education in the state of Utah?
A very big role, actually, or a very important role. We are asking those questions right now. I participated in a work group that was looking at equity of access. A lot of people struggle with the word equity. What does it mean? It's not equal, but it's equity. Does every student at Taylorsville High School have the same opportunity, the same understanding, the same skills prepared? Do their parents know what's available, etc.? What is the access level of every student at Taylorsville High School? And so we've been talking about this conversation. How do we begin the conversation in first and second grade so that every student who is at all the schools that feed into Taylorsville High School, that they know, I can take an AP class when I get to high school. I'm ready for that. I'm prepared for that because I'm going to college when I'm done. And those AP credits, they're going to mean something to me. And it's cost effective to take concurrent enrollment classes, et cetera. And so those are the things that we're working on right now as we open up that access, ensure that there aren't barriers, because there are barriers right now. There's counseling barriers, there's access barriers, and so we're talking about that currently. And we're looking at what's in board rule, what's in best practices, what are we talking about, what are counselors talking about, how are they trained, et cetera. And so that is ongoing, and it's a very important issue. I also had the opportunity this afternoon to participate in some interviews for what's called the Access Committee. It's an advisory committee that advises the State Board of Education, and it's compiled of members of minority communities. And I'm really excited about the ideas that they shared today on how they can help to provide that better access. So.
I really think that it starts from the bottom. At elementary school, we really need to provide those opportunities to all kids at all elementary schools so that they have the tools to succeed. And I also think that part of it is teacher training and making sure that these teachers are helping all students get the opportunities that they need. And I think that it's important for students of different ethnicities to be able to see that they can do great things and achieve great things. They shouldn't constantly just be seeing a certain race achieve greatness, because I think that that maybe plateaus them into a place that we don't want kids to be. We want all students of all races to be able to see themselves succeed, and I think it really starts at elementary school and giving kids the opportunities to see greatness as they get older.
As Royce is walking over, perhaps another question about another population, an at-risk population. Utah has a growing refugee population. What are your thoughts on how Utah schools are doing with providing the services that these refugee students need, and what can they do to do better? Megan?
I feel like at our elementary school, we are Title I, and we provide a lot of resources for families. I think that the district levels are really where we need to start providing services to these families in order to help them succeed. I know that our school, we have a family learning center to try and help families be successful and learn English and get access to those resources to help them with job applications and things like that. I don't know at the state level exactly how that plays out, but I think that we do need more resources to help these families, because it's a whole new world when you come here from another country.
This has been a question that I've been stewing on for actually quite some time. Many students come to this country and they're a junior in high school. And where do we put them? 11th grade. It doesn't matter what their preparation level is, where they're at, what that culturally means to them from wherever they came. We just put them right in based on their age, right where we think they should belong. And I think we have a lot of work that we can do to really come to understand where students are coming from, what they're going to need to succeed. Do they need more time? Because we expect them to catch up and be credit ready in 2 years of entering a new country and a new language, and to then to be ready for college. I mean, is that a real expectation? And so how can we expand our program? Is there adult learning opportunities that they could participate in, have some increased time to prepare themselves for opportunities outside of K-12 education? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity here. It's just how do we look at it? What flexibility can we put into the system that allows students to have the time to gain the language skills, and then to prepare themselves as far as how much time they need to prepare themselves for whatever comes next in their lives.
Thank you. And I think we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay, I'm Ann Murdoch, and my question is about bringing back civility to our schools. We keep talking about safe schools, and all we're thinking about lots of times is gun violence or things that hit the news every day. What we're not addressing necessarily is teaching our children or our teachers how to be civil in difficult situations. So how can either of you in the state can you start some kind of movement that goes back to teaching people self-responsibility and civility in the education system? We spend so much time talking about the standards and the academic growth and all of that, but without civility, it doesn't matter how smart or how brilliant or how much you have available to your brain, if you can't communicate civilly with people around you, that's a problem.
When I met you when you came in, you said, what's the most difficult question you're going to get asked? Well, you win. That is a hard question because, it's what is the role of a school in that civil discourse? But I think it comes from the example. Are we speaking civilly? I've enjoyed this debate. It doesn't feel very debate-like. It feels like a very civil conversation. Are we having those conversations as school leaders? Do we have them in our board meetings? Do we have them with district superintendents and teachers, and how do we set that example of civil conversations? But there's also there is a push to create opportunities and to create funding for schools who want to integrate some type of a character type education in their schools. And there's been some great successes across the state as far as that, but always the question is how do we fund it? And so I think it's going to be up to schools to really prioritize that as part if they want to integrate a program. But even some school leaders are just doing it, right? They're not looking for a program. They're not looking for something. I was in a school the other day, and the school leader he says, I want my kids to be happy. And so he's put murals all over the walls of the school. He's talked, he established his own values of here's what I want our values of our school to be. And he talks about them with students. He talks about them with teachers. And so there's a lot of great things happening. And I think it just takes the example of different people at every level of the education governance system to be civil and to speak civilly.
As a teacher, I totally see what you're talking about and where you're coming from. And it's really interesting because all the standards in the core are IQ standards. We don't really focus much on EQ, which is emotional needs of kids and students. And I feel like that does need to be something that's addressed because as a special educator, on students' IEPs, we make social skills goals. And I think that all kids, not just kids with disabilities, but all kids need some type of social skills goals, and I think that would be an interesting thing to try and move forward with, is to put more like social skills standards, EQ standards in the system and not just IQ, and so that kids learn how to solve their problems rationally and in a positive way, and hopefully that would help eliminate a lot of the bullying and tolerance issues that we're seeing come out in our schools. I would much rather teach those things than teach lockdown procedures.
Channy Trees. My question's kind of on the same grounds, only I would like to know what role you guys see yourselves playing in making our schools more secure, because we can only influence them behaviorally so far, and I want my kids coming home alive.
It's a huge concern right now amongst parents and educators alike. It's a very, very stressful time, especially within the last year and all the things that have gone on. And even in Jordan District, our suicide rate that's happening right now is astronomical. And they can say that to put school psychologists in every school, and that's helpful, but that's also not exactly a realistic thing you can do because there's not enough psychologists out there to put in schools. I really do think we need to start pushing for these character educations and these emotional skills to learn it with kids, because kids are struggling, and it's something we need to address, including the cyber part of it that maybe we don't have control over. But we need to find a way to really tune into this emotional part of our students right now, because it's a big issue that needs to be addressed. And as a teacher, I would much rather address that issue of the emotional health of our students than to practice the lockdown procedures and worry about that every day. I worry about it every day as an educator, and it's a really tough issue, and I would hope to see more emotional learning for kids.
I share your concern. Every time I get that robocall from the school that says the school's under lockdown right now, it makes your heart flutter. You hope that your kids are okay and that they're going to come home. safe and well and happy. And school safety is so multifaceted. There's dangers from the outside, there's dangers from the inside, there's dangers on their phones and in their relationships with other people at the school. And it's interesting, much of the state policy focuses on fire drills, right? And when was the last time we had a fire in a school? And so it's how do we grow up as a state, I guess, on this topic and recognize what it is that our students are struggling with. What does it mean to be safe in a school now? And how do we do that? And I think it's looking at multifacets. It's looking at the mental health issues of students and the teachers in the building, as well as the physical safety of the school. What are we doing to ensure that people can't get into the building and access our students, or that students can evacuate quickly? How do we know that we can respond quickly as a parent when you get that phone call? What's my role as a parent in being a part of ensuring my student safety? And so it's a multifaceted effort, and it is ongoing. There is a conversation. We have a current state board member who's on the Governor's Commission that's looking at school safety across the state, and they're doing an in-depth dive into schools and what can we do at the local level, at the school level, because it's going to be different at a school down in a rural community, and it's going to be different in a urban community. And so we're in that process, but I think it's going to take a lot of input from parents and school leaders as we try to address that issue of safety.
One final question before we move on to closing statements. You both have touched on some of your professional and your leadership experience. Tell us what makes you uniquely qualified to serve or to represent this district on the state school board. Yeah, Brittany.
I have been able to experience education from a lot of different perspectives. I'm a parent of 5 children at all ages in the school system. I have had my kids home for school doing an online school. I've been involved in charter schools. I've been a volunteer at a school. My kids go to neighborhood public schools. I am a licensed educator, and so I serve on a board of directors for a charter school, and so I see what that budgeting and what it looks like at the level of school governance as well. And so I've had the opportunity to see what education looks like, what it feels like from many different perspectives, and I feel like that allows me to hear you better, to understand where you're coming from, and to be able to represent you on the State Board of Education.
I feel like I have a lot of experience only because I have been, as a teacher of students with disabilities, I have to work really closely with their families and with the school and with the district at a level to ensure that all these students' needs are being met. And sometimes the communication between all those groups is really difficult. And so to navigate those waters, I feel like I have a lot of experience in that, and I can see multiple perspectives on an issue because of the families that I've worked with. I've also been a team leader, and I've had to work with teachers, and I'm on the teachers union, and I've had to hear issues from multiple perspectives in multiple areas, and so I feel like I am able to listen and see those issues from all perspectives.
All right, our time has come to a close. That was an hour well spent. You each now have 60 seconds to give your closing statements, and we begin with you, Megan.
I just want to say thank you. These questions that you guys were asking were really amazing questions, and I did not anticipate that level of questions, and I was really excited to answer them. I am excited to be part of the school board if that's what happens, and thank you all for coming out.
I began this process 4 years ago, not anticipating ever being elected. And so it kind of started out as a civics lesson. Wow, look at how interesting this would be. And here it is. It's been a fantastic lesson. And now my daughter is here as a first-time voter trying to decide who she wants to vote for. And so it's fascinating, and I'm excited to be a part of this process. It's been an honor to serve you over the last several years. And I have learned a lot, and I am prepared to continue to listen to you, to your needs, what you're trying to accomplish, what is important to you, and what are you trying to get from your education. And so I am honored to be here tonight, and I echo what Megan said. I appreciate your questions. I appreciate the thought that you put into and the time that you spend being here tonight. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking our candidates.